ex-Amazon employees don't always know the policies themselves.
Today we were speaking with Chris McCabe from ecommerceChris about all things compliance when it comes to our Amazon seller accounts, and basically how remaining pre-compliant can help you avoid red flags, which can be the worst thing for your business. And not to mention getting your account reinstated after suspension because of a stuck shipment. But be sure to stay tuned for more.
I'm Bryce Gracie, host of the EZee E-Commerce podcast, and this podcast is dedicated to boosting your trajectory towards international success through connecting you with e-commerce and Amazon experts, all with something different to offer.
Welcome back to the EZee E-Commerce podcast. Today we are joined by one of the specialists in the Amazon space. He's now working as an e-commerce consultant, as well as the owner and founder of ecommerceChris. But he started his journey within Amazon itself as an investigation specialist into merchant risk. So he really knows how to keep your Amazon account compliant. But thanks for joining us today, Chris McCabe. How are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm fantastic, thanks. Really excited to have you on the podcast and get you basically unleashing your knowledge on our e-commerce seller base.
That's right. I like to unleash things when it comes to compliance or reinstatement strategy. So happy to oblige.
Brilliant.
Yes.
So maybe to start, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about eCommerceChris?
Right. eCommerceChris grew out of my experience as an Amazon seller performance / merchant risk investigator for several years. When the marketplace was in its initial stages, when it was building, when it got to a cruising altitude, things started growing. Things were getting a little chaotic and disorganized, as a lot of sellers and brands have experienced. Some management mishaps and some procedural or standard operating procedure, process mishaps inside the company. I decided to leave and be a consultant because I saw that there were a lot of things breaking down that I thought I could help fix from the outside. So I've been independently consulting for the last 7 years. And we've got other ex-Amazonians with me on staff. So we've got a very kind of internal team, internal ops focus to reinstatement strategy when sellers get listings suspended or get their entire account suspended.
Okay, fantastic. And would you say that your past experience as inside Amazon itself kind of puts you in pole position to kind of give the best advice because you've kind of seen it from the inside?
Yeah, and also inside experience from these particular teams, or this team, Seller Performance, as it's commonly known, anyone involved in performance evaluation or policy enforcement, because a lot of sellers don't necessarily lose their entire account, but they get a warning for something they're doing wrong. Maybe they didn't understand a policy. And a lot of sellers don't understand that even one warning, that might be all you hear before you get suspended. So it gives us the right perspective to coach them on avoiding something terrible so that they don't have to contact us after the mission critical event of an account suspension. Hopefully they can respond to or appeal a warning that they got. And Amazon gets it wrong often too. Sometimes they send the wrong message to sellers. So having that internal knowledge gives us a sense of, gives us an ability to interpret how Amazon's communicating to sellers. Sellers often scratch their heads. Why did I get this? What is it from? And when they call in, they just get generic support. They don't really get diagnostic assistance. So that's kind of where we jump in.
Is there like a most frequent irregulation or problem that is coming through most often when it comes to suspensions? You say it's one warning could lead to a suspension itself. So is there like a most common reason for suspensions?
Oh, and some people don't even get one warning. Some people are just flat out suspended. And so that drives home the shock of it. But it probably means they were doing something they didn't realize was coloring outside of the lines until it was too late. And that was one thing I was going to talk about a little bit today, about sort of trusting professional advice that might be less than professional. Sometimes gets a seller suspended or gets them into trouble that they could have avoided. The one gap or mistake we see a lot of sellers have is not assigning like a compliance person within their operations that understands policies and interprets them the right way. And that results in a lot of avoidable problems becoming bigger problems when they get their whole account shut down. Amazon's changed a lot over the years. They communicate very poorly now. And there's not a lot of audit of investigative quality. So people are just getting these random messages sometimes and they don't understand why. And so that's why we're putting out as much content as possible to coach and educate people on what to do. Don't just take things at face value. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. So I guess it goes on to my next kind of topic. It would be in e-commerce, Chris. I've seen some of the blogs that you guys put out, and basically the way that you guys display thought leadership. And one of the aspects is speaking about message compliance.
Yeah.
Could you maybe talk a little bit more about what you guys understand about message compliance and how important it is for that post-order messaging?
Yeah, I mean, certainly nowadays, most sellers, most brands understand that they can't induce buyers to leave them a positive review or discourage them from leaving negatives. All the messaging has to be very kind of objective and neutral, extremely neutral. I mean, those days have kind of come and gone. But we've seen other messages going out where sellers are trying to divert buyers to a process where they're pumping an email address into their website or into various Facebook Messenger streams, marketing materials. And you can have competitors buy from you and go through your sales funnel and look at those messages and show to Amazon abuse teams something you're doing wrong. And you can get suspended for that pretty quickly. And when I say something you're doing wrong, I mean, if you look like you're harvesting email addresses as often as possible so you can communicate off platform, off Amazon Marketplace communications with your buyers, and that gets flagged, that's considered, you go from zero to serious very quickly if you're doing that. And I'm amazed that a lot of sellers don't understand that their competitors are walking through their sales funnel, taking screenshots and looking for available, opportunities to submit abuse reports and get them taken down. That happens all the time. So they might see their competitors doing something and getting away with it, but it doesn't mean they'll get away with it.
Yeah, wow, this is quite interesting, especially from a competition perspective. That means you have to be so careful, not only for your own brand, but for competitors trying to kind of knock you out of the game from your ill-advised advice that you received from a so-called professional, as well as maybe a lack of foresight into certain messaging compliance aspects.
Yeah, and I could almost add to that, ex-Amazon employees don't always know the policies themselves. So I'm not just casting aspersions on others out there. There are also people that worked at the company that we see either managing agencies or providing marketing advice or other kinds of compliance advice, but they didn't work on those compliance teams or they didn't work on policy enforcement teams. So they're either making assumptions that because they worked at Amazon, they know everything, and they're making mistakes, or, they're just offering advice that they haven't vetted through proper channels themselves. And so sometimes even ex-Amazonians are giving poor advice. It's something where sellers and brands can't afford an account suspension. They can't risk that. They have to ask vetting questions and scrutinize the advice they get from anybody.
Yeah, I guess you always have to be double checking. You can't just blindly trust in this market, I would say. So I guess doing that self-education is also very important.
Mm-hmm.
But if we have to go to the account management aspect of things, in your experience, what is the best way to keep an account compliant for sale?
So I think proactivity versus reacting to warnings. The biggest problem we notice is sellers either pursuing things on their own or pursuing improper advice, making the mistakes, then they do the compliance check after they've already been warned, after they've already been reprimanded or disciplined. A layer of compliance review should take place before you ever get a warning. I know it's hard to allocate resources and staff and time and energy to something that you think might not ever happen or hasn't happened yet, but that's how you prevent it from happening. Once you've gotten the warning, there's already a strike against your account health or your record, let's say. So doing it in a preventive fashion is much better. I mean, Amazon will value you more, of course, if they have to review your account less, if they have to warn you fewer times. But not only are you saving yourself a potentially damaging account suspension, it's just good operations. It's good SOPs to get your teams in. Let's review things before we do them, because we still see so many people creating listings that aren't compliant from the very beginning. You know, if they had just double checked what can go into a title, what can go on a product detail page, they wouldn't have had these listings suspended. They wouldn't have had these warnings sent. So it's really just one layer of compliance review that they need to add to a process that's probably already pretty good if they're selling well. So just thinking proactively, not reacting, you know, anticipate problems, because Amazon won't necessarily pat you on the shoulder and say, take another look at this before we have to warn you next week. That's not how Amazon is. Amazon reacts too. They're not so proactive in their education of sellers. They expect sellers to educate themselves. They give you basic tools for knowledge growth and expansion, but they expect you to have the knowledge yourself. And they expect you to know everything before you list anything. And they expect you to know all the policies. I mean, a lot of sellers don't think that's realistic just because it's such a wide-ranging, you know, amount of material. But realistic or not, those are Amazon's expectations. So you spare yourself a lot of pain later and a lot of time lost, not just revenue, if you set things up right on the way in. Otherwise, you spend all your time chasing your tail instead of growing and launching new SKUs.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. Because a lot of what you just said now also comes through very strong in the ZEE environment when we speak about product compliance as well as import compliance, and basically ensuring that you are pre-compliant so that you don't face the obstacles down the road.
Oh, sure.
So it's basically doing the hard yards, both from a customs and a product perspective, in terms of finding out that your product is legal for sale and for imports into a certain country. So ensuring that you have the correct documents, that the regulations meet up to scratch with the country laws, and I guess it all ties in quite well. And I guess one product that's quite difficult right now, or one type of product that's quite difficult right now on the Amazon market in the EU right now is supplements. And we see that's quite heavily on our side. But I also saw that you guys also had something to say on supplement compliance on Amazon. And, I mean, just as a brief overview, like, do you think it'll get any easier? Are there tips and tricks that people need to be looking for?
Well, lately, supplement compliance has been going through some earthquakes because we have a lot of brands that we work with whose competitors are selling products where the label contents don't match the actual contents of the product. So we expect there to be more bumps in that road because there are a lot of legit supplement sellers who are competing with illegitimate ones, and Amazon still has not rectified or corrected that. And a lot of products, I suppose one word of advice is if you're a legit supplement seller, you should buy from your competitors and have some of the contents of those products tested independently in the lab, because a lot of people have done this and they've found that the contents do not match the label at all. Sometimes there are ingredients present in the testing that aren't on the label. Sometimes there are harmful ingredients involved. So the compliance for this category is ongoing. Improvements or review. And I would expect, the best advice is have all your documentation in order, because at some point Amazon's going to have to prompt everybody to resubmit documentation to prove that they're using ISO certified labs, or to prove that they've got their compliance processes in order, because every time one of these supplement sellers is caught selling something different from what they've got listed on Amazon, it creates a lot of strife inside Amazon and inside internal team operations for not catching it and for exposing buyers to risk.
And I guess that still comes a full cycle back to what you said earlier in terms of having that dedicated compliance person within a company to avoid those kind of issues and that kind of miscommunication with customers.
For sure.
Detrimental to the business.
Yeah, and also understanding things like backend keyword abuse. A lot of people don't understand that async contributions can be made by anyone to a private label listing, to a branded listing, even if you're in brand registry. So keeping an eye on vacant fields in your flat files and having somebody who understands what backend keyword abuse is, who's managing your listings, because a competitor can tuck a term or a keyword in there that gets your listing flagged and suspended. So a lot of people don't understand the nuances of how they can be attacked. And at peak periods like Prime Day or Christmas or, everything in between, but especially during peak periods, you have to understand that somebody will try to come in at the last minute right before, let's say, Prime Day and get your listings taken down for compliance reasons. So not only do you have to understand how not to make mistakes yourself, you have to understand how other people might make it look like you're making a mistake. And that knowledge isn't always baked into a handbook that you might have when you join a company that sells on Amazon and all of a sudden you're managing their Amazon account. That takes months or years to learn. So we, encourage people to have all their ducks in a row right before any peak period so that they know how to protect themselves or react quickly. If they haven't done it in advance, they react quickly when they get attacked.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I guess something that is central to ZEE and basically one of our core value proposition is stopping stuck shipments from happening, right, at customers. Yeah. But we also realize that an Amazon account can be suspended for late shipments, which often is as a result of stuck shipments.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the best way to reinstate your Amazon accounts if it has been suspended for late shipments?
Well, the suspensions we've been working on for late shipments were people who were confirming the orders as shipped before they shipped. So advice one is don't confirm orders as shipped before they've shipped, or don't work with a company or hire anyone who's doing that on your behalf, even if you're not aware of it, because Amazon will suspend the account, and often they sign people out of their accounts if they think that they're pretending that orders have shipped on time that did not ship on time. We're getting a lot of those cases. Those have to be plans of action that are very robust in terms of making sure that you convince seller performance that you're never, whether it's inside your own operation or somebody you've hired out to handle this, you never confirm orders as shipped unless you know for a fact 100% that they're shipped. But beyond that, we've heard people saying, well, it's global supply chain problems. We don't have the inventory. Just make sure you're not listing anything, placing an offer where somebody could buy and you don't have the inventory locked down. We understand there's uncertainty out there, again, in global supply chain, but don't make promises you can't keep. Amazon won't accept the excuse of, well, there's a lot of disruption in global supply chain. We didn't have what we thought we had in stock. We had over-promising, under-delivering from our supplier. None of that's going to fly with Amazon. So the appeal that you'd write to get reinstated would have to prove to them that you're never going to depend on less stable sources for inventory, because Amazon expects that if you're willing to do that, you're willing to overpromise and underdeliver yourself based on your supplier promises, and you're going to create tons of disruption with their buyers. So,
I mean, that's some straight up wisdom, Chris.
Yeah,
I think sellers are really going to benefit from that last one. You have done quite a lot within the Amazon space in the last, I think it's the last 10 years or so. But I'm curious to see what's next for yourself and for ecommerceChris. Where do you see yourself in the next year?
Yeah, so we're working with more and more brands, growing brands and larger brands. I think within the next year, we're going to create, at ecommerceChris, we're going to create a bit more content that speaks to all levels of the growing brand, small, medium, and large. We work with a lot of large brands, of course, and medium-sized brands. For smaller brands, I want to get them in position quicker and earlier in their growth process to spend a lot more time focused on actual growth and launching new SKUs and expanding their operations, maybe expanding to different marketplaces, instead of learning the basics of Amazon policy one-on-one, instead of constantly plugging leaks in different parts of their operations, to focus more on growth and less on just cleaning up mistakes, and less on supply chain issues, and less time spent communicating with my former teams, less time spent writing appeals, because you're never really going to get better communication out of my former teams than you get today. It might even get worse. Seller Performance is addicted to sending copy and paste generic messages that lots of brands are losing time trying to figure out, read those tea leaves, trying to figure out what to say and why Amazon's saying what they're saying in those messages. Lots of time lost on communication. I want smaller brands to realize earlier what Amazon is like and why Amazon communicates the way they do and why they reject certain kinds of appeals, because you need to solve those problems faster and you need to have a tighter operational guideline internal to your own company, in your own account management, so that you don't waste so much time on that and you can invest that time in growth and launching new products.
Brilliant. So it's basically moving more towards full-scale account management, and almost accelerating their growth and providing value by helping them both grow in their revenue figures, but also in their SKU, in their products, and overall in their business intelligence as well.
Exactly.
Brilliant. Well, then, to be honest, there's no better partner for ZEE clients, because at ZEE we focus on that international expansion. We focus on getting them into other markets. And if ecommerceChris can assist in those other markets as well from an account management perspective, not only stopping the bad things from happening, but allowing good things to happen as well, I can foresee no better partnership. And Chris, I'd just like to thank you so much for being on our podcast. You've provided such tremendous value to the Amazon space in the last couple of years, and we really look forward to partnering with you in the future and providing value to e-commerce sellers around the world together. And we really look forward to having you on our podcast again sometime. And yes, really appreciate it. And thank you for joining us.
Sure thing. Thanks so much.
Thanks for watching the EZee E-Commerce podcast. Click here for more episodes and follow us on our socials link below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe.